Hi, my name is Mark Dempsey. I'm an author and journalist, and I'd like to tell you about my experience with America's Promise in Washington, D.C. America's Promise is a nonprofit, and it was founded several years ago by General Colin Powell and his wife, Alma. Now, one of the concerns that America's Promise has is the high school dropout rate in the U.S. And it's true. Over 1 million kids drop out of school every single year, and the overall dropout rate is 33%. But when you look at minority kids, it's much, much larger. It's over 50% for African American and Hispanic students. And that's an absolute disgrace, and they're right, something needs to be done about it. Now, they get a lot of press on this. They've been in every publication, they've been on national television and radio, etc. And I just wanted to see if their public statements match their private actions. And so this is what I did. I sent the CEO of America's Promise a very brief email describing a project that I had that would reduce the high school dropout rate, would encourage kids to learn, would encourage them to read, and would encourage them to stay in school. It would also provide positive role models for African American and Hispanic children. Well, she immediately forwarded my email to the Chief Development Officer of America's Promise. And I sent her the proposal. And I followed up sometime later with her, and I said, well, did you get the materials that I sent you? And this is exactly what she told me. She said, Mark, thank you. I did receive them and reviewed briefly today. I would like our Senior VP of Communications to review it as well. And he is on vacation this week, and I'm on travel next week. Why don't we reconnect the following week, if that is convenient? My assistant, copied here, can work with you to find 30 minutes for a call. Please note she is also on vacation this week and will return next Tuesday. Well, my goodness, is everyone on vacation there? Is everyone traveling? Who's minding the store? I just couldn't believe it. So, I had to wait 2 whole weeks to talk to the Chief Development Officer of America's Promise. And when I finally got her on the phone, I was very disappointed. Now, why was I disappointed? Because she did not seem familiar with the project that had been sitting on her desk for 2 weeks. Did she ask me any questions? No, didn't do that. Did she make any, smart comments? I mean, any, insightful comments? No, didn't do that either. All she did was just listen to me. And she referred me to a very small nonprofit called Mentor in Washington, D.C. And she said, give them a call. And she gave me the chief administrative officer's name, and which she didn't know because she had to look it up online. And so I called that person. And I also emailed her. And she never returned my phone call. And she never returned my email. That's how interested she was in a project that would reduce the dropout rate in this country and that would encourage mentors to help kids to stay in school. Well, I emailed the Chief Development Officer and I said, I'm really disheartened and my goodness, is there something else that you can do? Can you find me another nonprofit to work with in the alliance? And she said this to me. She said, Mark, let me get with our program team and see if we can recommend a few others. Sorry to learn of your experience with Mentor. Well, did she do that? Nope, didn't do that. Never heard from her. I never got any further recommendations. And that was very, very disappointing. So it really made me think, now, is she a person of her word? That was a question that was in my mind. America's Promise gets millions and millions of dollars from big corporations. And they expect results. And the attitude that I got when I was there was far from getting results. It was. There was no sense of commitment. There was no sense of urgency. There was no sense of focus. There was a lackadaisical, foot-dragging attitude. And when you look at America's Promise record around the country, when they hold these big summits to try to reduce dropout rates in various states, you will see that they are not effective at all because the dropout rate still remains extremely high today. They haven't done anything whatsoever that is going to make a positive impact on the high school dropout rate in this country. Now you would think, my goodness, how can this possibly be? General Colin Powell, one of the most respected men in America. General Colin Powell, a decisive leader, general, former Joint Chiefs of Staff head. My goodness, how can that possibly be that his nonprofit would be so non-focused, would be so just not really caring about the very issue that he's invested a lot of time, energy, and money in. How can that possibly be? Well, it is. And what do companies get when they give money to America's Promise? Well, they get a tax deduction. That's the first thing they get. And secondly, they get a nice public relations boost because of General Colin Powell. On the America's Promise website, it says, "Together we can and we will prepare children and youth for college, work, and life." General Powell, you will not do those things unless things improve internally at America's Promise. I assure you of that. There was no interest in my project that I had. I spent hours on the proposal. And that was really disappointing. And it was disheartening to me that America's Promise would do such a thing. I think America's Promise needs to promise themselves to do a much better job in the future. And I certainly hope they will do that. Not just because of Mark Dempsey, but because of the kids in this country, the over 1 million kids who drop out. If they're counting on America's Promise to help them stay in school, well, I think they'll be sorely disappointed. My name is Mark Dempsey, and if you'd like to contact me directly, you're certainly welcome to. My email address is markd112@yahoo.com, markd112@yahoo.com, and thanks so much for listening.